when I appeared in 2009 on Governor Ventura's show, which was precipitated by Alex Jones, as you mentioned, it seemed shocking when I said, this is what the would-be controllers, the controligarchs, as they are now being called, the tyrants of the world want to do. They are waiting to get the science in place, and then this is what they are going to do. And they've done everything so far that they said they were going to do it. John D. Rockefeller Sr. was the world's first billionaire, and he was a visionary. Not only was he an unbelievably ruthless, cruel, and inhuman sort of fellow, he was a psychopath, start to finish. And this is the brilliance of this evil man. In order to do this, in order to cleanse the world of the unfit and get rid of everybody that I don't think should exist, in order to do that, we have to reshape society. We have to destroy the family. We have to destroy religion. We have to control education. We have to control reproduction. We know about the normalization of pedophilia. We know about the destruction of children. Sure, and continual sexualization, hyper-sexualisation of children to stunt their psychosexual, their emotional, and their affective, their relationship capacity, and make them easily controlled slaves. And you see that this has been a long-term program. Rockefeller's funding the insane pedophile named Alfred Kinsey and making him into a god of sexuality, when this guy was hiring sick psychopath. These excess deaths are the murders, the Holocaust murders of our fellow human beings, our mothers, our brothers, our fathers.
Good evening and welcome everyone. Is my next guest a prophet? Now that's a valid question, considering that in 2009, she went on the Alex Jones show, and in front of Alex Jones and Governor Jesse Ventura was able to accurately predict the medical tyranny that occurred in the USA and globally in 2020 and 2021. In addition to being a prophet, my guest is a world-renowned doctor, psychiatrist, and human rights activist, and has practiced drug-free natural medicine for over 40 years. Dr. Rima Laibow, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to say that it's actually over 50 years that I've practiced drug-free medicine and psychiatry.
Wow, and it's an honor and a pleasure to have you back. Now, can you please clarify? We can talk about your medical history, your career in a moment, but I just want to clarify the question that I put in the introduction. Are you a prophet? Do you have psychic powers?
No, well, I may have psychic powers. We all do, but I'm not a prophet. What I am is somebody who can read documents and sort fact from fiction fairly well. And when very powerful, very, very determined forces make public what they intend to do and what they have done, and when they have more money than God, I read their documents, I take them very, very seriously. When I appeared in 2009 on Governor Ventura's show, which was precipitated by Alex Jones, as you mentioned, it seemed shocking when I said, this is what the would-be controllers, the controligarchs, as they are now being called, the tyrants of the world want to do. They are waiting to get the science in place, and then this is what they are going to do. So the only unusual thing about my knowledge was that I took the time to read their literature and their documents, and I took them very, very seriously, because they're not wasting their time and they're not funning. They're telling each other and us and governments and medical establishments how they are going to move forward. And they've done everything so far that they said they were going to do. And who is they? Well, John D. Rockefeller Sr. was the world's first billionaire. And he was a visionary. Not only was he an unbelievably ruthless, cruel, and inhuman sort of fellow, he was a psychopath, start to finish. But in addition to that, and by the way, how cruel? Well, through his brutal trade practices, he bankrupted 98% of the world's oil industry so that he could take it over. That's pretty brutal, like there's no enough. Everything is only half of enough for people like that. And he had some workers who were on strike at Ludlow, Massachusetts. And they said, yeah, we actually need enough money to feed our families, like that. And so there were workers camped in tents outside the refinery at Ludlow, Massachusetts. And so in the middle of the night, he had his thugs set fire to the workers' tents. They had their wives and their children, kind of like the Ottawa truckers who had their families with them and so on. It was a peaceful, humane kind of gathering. So he massacred. He was directly responsible for giving the order to massacre a great many women and children and workers and so on in order to break the strike. Well, that worked. This is the kind of man we're talking about. So when Francis Galton at Stanford University started writing about the new science, God help us, the science of eugenics, clean or correct genetics, making the genetics of the human population clean and correct and right through mass murder. And you can do that by starvation. You can do that by sterilization. You can do that by actual execution, by imprisonment and experimentation leading to death. And you can do that by wars. Wars are good because they're very profitable. You can fund both sides and make a profit on both sides. Wars are primo for this. So John D. Rockefeller Sr. said, well, all righty then. And he said, in order to do this, and this is the brilliance of this evil man, in order to do this, in order to cleanse the world of the unfit and get rid of everybody that I don't think should exist, in order to do that, we have to reshape society. We have to destroy the family. We have to destroy religion. We have to control education. We have to control reproduction. We have to control the number of people who live. We have to control So he laid out a complete plan, and he said, okay, I've got enough money to do this, but it's kind of lonely up here at the top of this evil pyramid. So he reached out to his buddies, like Andrew Carnegie, a self-made psychopath rich man who was a member of his circle, and to the Vanderbilts and to the other robber barons who were raping and pillaging society anyway, to their great fortune amassment. And he said, hey, you know what? We could shape the world so we're the kings and everybody else either is dead or is a servant. And they created literally a long-term, highly complicated plan to take over the entire world. And they had all the money and all the time. And they, like the Chinese, they had the long-term view. They didn't have to do it this week or next week. Now, John D. Rockefeller Jr., who more people are familiar with than Senior, came along and he said, oh, yeah, Dad. Now, he ran Standard Oil for about 5 years, the oil company that was generating the world's petroleum and huge amounts of money. And then he said, Dad, hey, listen, how about I just take over shaping the world? We can get somebody else to do the business part. And interestingly, a guy named William Gates, as far as we know, no relative of the
I was actually
current
going to
bad
ask you about
actor.
him. I was
Yeah,
actually going to ask you about William Gates,
William
whether
Gates.
he's related to Bill Gates and
As
his role in the
far
climate.
as my research and other people's research has been able to indicate, it's not an uncommon name. I mean, we had a CIA director in the United States who was named William Gates. As far as we can tell, they are not related. The Gates monster that we have is from another line of Gateses.
What a coincidence,
He came
though,
in.
eh?
What a coincidence! What a
The
coincidence!
first pandemic
So
was a swine flu. It was like I guess, a dry run for what we experienced in 2020.
it's very interesting that you should mention that the Spanish flu
Oh, sorry, the Spanish.
was,
I meant the Spanish
yes,
flu. Sorry, not the
I
swine
knew
flu. The
you did.
Spanish. Yeah,
I knew you did. The Spanish flu in 1918, 1919, which we think killed about 50 million people. You know, for a eugenicist, it's a good start. And it certainly had a huge impact on society. It killed A through because you have gone very still. Ah, there we are. Where did you lose me?
um, uh, somewhere around the Spanish flu, where
The
they killed
Spanish flu.
50 million people, and then you froze. I don't know whether that was a
50
coincidental
million
glitch
people.
or
Yeah, well, my internet keeps freezing when I get to the interesting
maybe the
parts.
sensors are
So,
listening in.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Hi, guys. Don't vaccinate your children. Don't vaccinate yourself. Have a nice day.
They
So,
probably aren't
I don't.
vaccinated themselves.
Oh, well, actually, the useful idiot goons tend to go along with the program. It's the higher ups who tend not to be so much persuaded. But anyway, um, there was a toxic um, vaccine bioweapon program that Teddy Roosevelt agreed to, thought was a great idea, that was presented by John D. Rockefeller Sr. and Jr. to him, and soldiers, American soldiers, were experimented on at a base, a U.S. Army base at Manhattan, Kansas. Then the soldiers were taken to New York City, where they were given some days of rest and recreation. Then they were put on troop ships and they were taken. It was a much slower journey. They were in unhealthy conditions and they didn't have fresh air and good food and so on. So, having been poisoned with these experimental bioweapon vaccines, 120 years or 100 years less scientifically sophisticated, but still pretty bad. They were badly um, uh, badly underfed and so on, and they got to Europe and they were quite sick. And then they were exposed experimentally to poison gas. Well, one of the things that mustard gas does, if it doesn't kill you, is it kind of messes up your immune system. It does quite a lot of damage to your lung system because you're breathing in the stuff, and so the entire part of your immune system that requires an intact respiratory uh, tissue system lining your lungs and your nose and your mouth, that's all destroyed. So now you have destroyed one of the three main immune barrier components. And these people were very sick. They became ill with something, God knows what was transmuted in them, one virus to another, exchanging plasmids and so on. Who knows? Anyhow, they became very sick and apparently became contagious. And so these people were the super spreaders of this plague. Now, young, healthy people, do you know this story? Do your listeners know this story? Because I don't want to repeat information that they already know.
So this is still related to the Spanish flu.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
think, look, I think a lot of our listeners might be familiar with it, but maybe not the particulars of it. So please feel free
Okay.
to.
All right. So briefly, so there was a company called Bayer in Europe, Bayer. I don't know how you say it in Australia.
It's a
Maybe Bayer,
German
maybe
company,
Bayer. How
right?
the German pharmaceutical company, right? Now, around this time, John D. Rockefeller Sr. and John D. Rockefeller Jr. made a mistake. They said, you know, the internal combustion engine is never going to develop enough to consume all of our oil resources. And we basically either own or have controlling interest in the entire oil output of the entire world. So we're really interested in what happens to output and consumption of oil. We like that a lot. And so they sent, John D. Rockefeller Jr. sent agents around the world looking for alternative consumption streams to figure out what to do with the oil that the internal combustion engine wasn't going to use up. Well, some of the agents went to Germany, and they came back and they said, hey, boss, listen, there's this organic chemistry revolution that's taking place. They take hydrocarbons, they take petroleum gunk that's left at the bottom of a cracking tower that nobody has any use for, and they extract the hydrocarbons and they make things happen. They make organic chemistry things called pharmaceuticals, drugs, and they're using up this stuff and we own it. And John D. Rockefeller Jr. specifically said, oh yeah, that's cool. So he sent his agents. Remember, this guy had more money than God. And he sent his agents to Germany and Switzerland and France, and they bought controlling interest. Never buy the whole thing. You don't have to waste the money. Just buy the controlling interest. They bought controlling interest in the entire pharmaceutical industry. And then they had a problem because nobody wanted these things. There were better ways to treat people. There were herbs and there were homeopathic remedies. There were naturopathic ways of treating people and chiropractic ways and osteopathic ways, and that was competition. So in the same way that he had driven the oil industry companies out of business, he commissioned the Flexner Report. He created the Rockefeller Institute. He created reinforced the Allopathic Medical Association, the American Medical Association, and he created the medical schools, and he did all that in the American, the legislation. He bribed each state with $1 million, which back then was some money. And he created the allopathic medical system, and then he marketed it with Edwin Bernays. We know that story. Okay, now it's important to know that at the same time, there was another part of the Rockefeller fortunes called the Laura Steadman Memorial. Laura Steadman was John D. Rockefeller Sr.'s wife, and therefore Jr.'s mother. And at some point she died. And so they created the Laura Steadman Memorial Fund, which took over governance worldwide the same way that the Rockefeller Institute and the Rockefeller Fund and the Rockefeller University and that whole predatory system took over allopathic medicine. And why is that important? And in the meantime, they had created public health and the schools of public health and the University of Chicago and all that stuff. Now, parenthesis, this whole time that this was going on, they were carefully and abundantly financing the science of eugenics. And they were doing that in Germany because it was the Rockefellers who actually introduced eugenics to Germany and set up the Kaiser Wilhelm Institutes in Munich and Berlin. Obviously, that was before Hitler because it was called the Kaiser Wilhelm Institutes. They also groomed and brought forward and supported Hitler, as did the other American industrialists. That's a different story, but it's all part of the same eugenics. As you pointed out, war is great. You make a lot of money and you kill a lot of people and you gain a lot of influence and you control a lot of territory.
And
war is
people.
cool for them. And
you distract the population. You get them to look.
Yeah, absolutely. You destroy the population.
No one's talking about excess deaths now. No one's talking about it. People are talking about the situation in Gaza and the Ukraine.
Exactly. And by the way, the situation in Gaza, in my analysis, and the situation in the Ukraine is specifically designed to serve the globalist advancement and hegemony. It's what it's for. And that I see that the Ukraine conflict kind of ran out of steam, and we didn't actually get the hot war with Russia that they were kind of hoping for. And so they said, oh, I know, the Middle East, that's always good. That always works. We can do that. How about that? And one of the things that I really want to emphasize, people said, ceasefire, we got to have a ceasefire, got to have a ceasefire. Gazans come in and they rape and they pillage and they violate and they mutilate and so on. And now we got to have a ceasefire. There was a ceasefire. The incursion, which was a stand down by Israel, could not have happened without the IDF and Mossad standing down, as there was a stand down for the 9/11 disasters. Without government stand down, that could not have happened. And oh, by the way, you probably already know that the United States intelligence system said to the Israeli intelligence system on October 6th, listen, it's going to be an incursion right there, because look at the hang gliders and the bulldozers and like that. You notice them? They're over there. That's what they're there for. And the response of the Israeli poobahs was to take the troops away from that incursion point and send them north. But for 3 months, the women who watched the screens for 4 hours at a time had been saying, boss, look what they're doing. And those reports had been quashed. So we know that it was a stand down without question. Was it an atrocity? Absolutely. Is there now an atrocity? Absolutely. But the most interesting thing to me is what's being done with the atrocity. These people, the monsters, don't really care what happens to Jews or Arabs or anybody else, because these are depopulationist psychopathic monsters. What they do care about is that they can fragment society. They can enhance a kind of virulent, insane tribalism that has nothing to do with reality. They are so good at this that they can get the LBGTQ F and a half, and you add your shoe size in because it keeps growing, communities to support people who, if they were in contact with those people, would be killed. They can get people, the LGBTQ community, to support Palestinians who would throw them with their hands tied off the highest building in Gaza. Say
Queers
what?
for Palestine.
Okay. What?
Queers
Queers for
for Palestine.
Palestine. Oh, dear God. Which is not to say that adults should not have the right to love whomever they like. I want to be quite categorical. Anytime you find love and you're not molesting a child, God bless you. That's lovely. But pedophilia, that's sort of a different matter. And by the way, we know about the normalization of pedophilia. We know about the destruction of children. We know that the comprehensive sexuality education, SOGI 123 in Canada, call it what you like. This is part of the globalist destruction to take the impact and the traumatic mind control techniques of premature and continual sexualization, hypersexualization of children to stunt their psychosexual, their emotional, and their affective, their relationship capacity, and make them easily controlled slaves. That's part of this horrendous program. So if you put all this together and you see that this has been a long-term program, and I could go on and on in the details of how the program was put together. Rockefeller's funding the insane pedophile named Alfred Kinsey and making him into a god of sexuality, when this guy was hiring sick psychopath. He was hiring known Nazi pedophiles to rape children with stopwatches to see how long it took the babies and toddlers and young children to, quote, orgasm, defining an orgasm as crying, convulsing, fainting, becoming unresponsive. Those are
Wow.
orgasms. And I mean, craziness. But this was designed to destroy society on every parameter possible. The Rockefellers supported suffrage, women's suffrage. They didn't care who voted in the least, but they wanted to help break the traditional family structure. And they wanted women in the factories. They wanted women on the streets. They wanted women in political struggles. And I happen to believe in political suffrage for women. I happen to believe in women having the right to careers and so on and so on and so on. But that's not why they were supporting it. They were supporting it in order to restructure human society so that cohesion, and this is all about love. What is she talking about? What has this got to do with love? I'm a child psychiatrist as well as a physician. I'm a psychoanalyst. And I understand, or the way I understand the essential basic nature of humanity is that we affiliate first with the mother in whose body we grow, then with the mother who or person who takes care of us, typically the mother, and we form a loving bond. And in that loving bond, we learn that other people have needs that are as important as our own. We learn that we can develop capacity by engaging in a compassionate way with other people. We learn to connect, we learn to trust, we learn to affiliate, we learn to work together, to collaborate, to cooperate, and we learn to love. And if you take the love component out of that, what you have is semi-human beings, subhuman beings, if you will. And then you add the genetic manipulation through the self-assembling nanotechnology and the mRNA and the DNA gene manipulation shots that 3/4 of the population has been corrupted and polluted with. And if you add the fact that we're already in a genocide, we know that at least 17 to 20 million people have already died directly from the shots. It's not a mystery. We know what they're dying
And that's
from.
a
They're
conservative
dying.
estimate.
That's a very conservative estimate from biostatisticians who know a great deal more about numbers than I do. I mean, I can count, but that's all I do with numbers. And I don't do time zones too well. So the point is that humanity is being destroyed from the DNA out, from the social structure out, from the economic, the agricultural structure out, from the family out, from the social system out, in order to compel us into the 17 sustainability development goal blocks that will literally destroy humanity and humans, leaving a tiny fragment alive to serve from a diminished point of view from which humanity, if they have their way, will never recover. So we can't let that happen, right? I mean, why would we let that happen? Anybody who says, oh, well, that's too much for my head, or, I'm busy, I have to go get my shoelaces pressed, is saying, yes, I vote for them. And those people have no right to complain when they and their family and their property are diminished. But the rest of us understand that we have to do something. And so what do we do? Well, in 2004, when my husband, Major General Albert N. Stubblebine III, and I closed our practice of medicine in order to take on the body politic of the and stop the globalists, derail the globalist agenda. When we did that, we said, okay, we have to figure out what they're doing, why they're doing it, and we have to find the most effective tactics with which to achieve our strategic objective, which is getting them the hell out of our world. Very simple. And we discovered that although the political process, and this is true in the United States, it's true in Australia, it's true in New Zealand, it's true in Vanuatu, it's true in Zimbabwe, it's true in Kenya, it's true everywhere, everywhere. The political process is thoroughly corrupt. I mentioned that governance has been taken over in the same way that medicine has been taken over. And we know that politicians are generally not really very useful for us. Rarely do we have decent people. Well, rarely do we have people who remain decent people in the political sphere. They might start out as decent human beings, but they're corrupted, they're co-opted, they're whatever, you know? And so what you get is that. And people say, well, you know, you can't trust them. Of course you can't trust them. They respond to pressure. It doesn't matter what they believe. If I can force the people who have the function of gatekeeper to get my country and your country and everybody else's country out of a system that has been as specifically set up to diminish and destroy humanity, then I will do that by applying legitimate nonviolent pressure. How do you do that? It's a numbers game. The other side has all the money. They have the dollars, Australian dollars, US dollars, they have the gold, they got the money, they got the numbers. We've got the people for a while. Not for long because they're trying real hard to kill us, and what I have found through personal experience is that when you mobilize a sufficient number of people, and I'm talking about millions of people, to pressure their politicians, saying, you must do this, don't you dare do that. When you do that in large enough numbers, it's magic. These cowardly toads back up and they say, okay, and then they do what you are forcing them to do. Now, do they like it? Who cares? Do they believe in it? Who cares? What they do is what you force them to do. And meanwhile, that gives us a chance to repair society and to put things back together. Now, what is it that has to happen? Right now, in Canada, there is a parliamentary petition created by an ordinary citizen, just like you and me, Doug Porter, in British Columbia, to get Parliament to get Canada out of the United Nations, WHO, UNESCO, UNICEF. Every one of them is equally toxic and corrupt. Simultaneously, in the United States, 2 members of Congress have actually done something good. I mean, you know, it takes your breath away. Chip Roy in the House of Representatives and Mike Lee in the Senate have together introduced a pair of bills that match, and it's called the Disengage Entirely from the United Nations Debacle Act. Disengage entirely from the United Nations Debacle Act. So we need in the United States to get that passed. In Canada, we need hundreds of thousands more signatures. In Australia, Malcolm Roberts just went before the Parliament and he said, no, this is all bad. We need to get this. We need to get we'll come for them and we need to fix this, right? I just said that. Now, that's only happening because we, the people, are saying, oh, no, 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 no. And we're saying it louder and we're saying it more effectively. And we have the power to literally force our countries out of this death machine. If anybody has looked at the 17 sustainability goals, what they see is that every aspect of life is controlled. And as Klaus Schwab has said, you will own nothing and you will be happy and you will eat the bugs. And recently, Klaus Schwab made a video and he said, the anti-system system is against the system. Well, yes. And what that means is that we're pushing them. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the head of WHO, monster, genocidalist, responsible for 2 million deaths in his own country of Ethiopia, which just happened to be in a tribe that his tribe has been historically at war with forever. So he just killed 2 million of them. Good start. Tedros Ghebreyesus is saying, oh, no, we wouldn't take away the sovereignty. No, we're good people, and so on. So each of these leader people is saying, no, we're really, don't look over there, because we are pushing them. And what we have to do is push 1,000 times harder, because they're shaking. And we have, in my view, this one last chance, because at the same time that they're shaking because of our pressure, they're also solidifying and consolidating their gains, their position, their control of property and food. There are 86,000 tractors fill the streets of Berlin in a protest. The farmers are having their farms taken away from them in Germany, as they did in the Netherlands, to create starvation and death and dependence on their system. So if we do not rise up peacefully and with each other and tell us we make them that they have to do that, then we're agreeing to our own slaughter and destruction.
Now, Dr. Laibow, we have an exceptional audience tonight that are watching. Cafe Locked Out, they're awake, but unfortunately they're the exception, and you're an exception. And I don't believe, just from my perspective, I want to be corrected on this. I want to be wrong on this though. But when I look at the general population, at least where I am on the ground in Australia, most people are just asleep. They're apathetic. Even people that were somewhat skeptical of what was going on during COVID are now apathetic, and they think, oh, that was just a blip in our history and it's time to move on. We can, focus on sports, go to football games, and be involved in all of this mundane garbage and get distracted with it. So, but I hope I'm wrong on that.
Well, the future of humanity depends on that not being the case. It's that simple. There are two things here in the United States. Now, I don't know Australia intimately. I know the United States more intimately. But there are two things in the United States that have a chance of mobilizing people. One is the intentional sexualization, traumatization, pedophiliation, if you will, of people's children. That has a chance of really mobilizing people, saying, no, don't you dare. That's one. The other, much stronger in the United States, because not everybody has a kid, and some people are so brain dead through woke indoctrination that they actually think what's going on is okay. But everybody's got a car. And in the United States, everybody loves their cars. And under the sustainability development goals, as the mayor of London said a couple of months ago, and then he was echoed 3 days later by the mayor of Phoenix, Arizona, you will have no cars, you will have no meat, you will have no dairy, you won't be able to smoke a cigarette. And if kids don't mobilize people, cars will. Once people really figure out that they can't have a car under the sustainability development goals, they can't go anywhere. that they can't walk or bicycle. Once they figure that out, that they will have no private property. I live in a private house, but under their plan, I won't. I will live in a dog kennel, 16 square meters for my entire life. What do you think all that nonsense propaganda about tiny houses? Look, here's a 73-year-old lady who lives in a tiny house. Oh, isn't that lovely? And here's a homeless guy who lives in a tiny house. Isn't that
And
splendid?
they present
And
these
you
tiny
too can live
houses
in a
as
tiny house.
five-star. They present these tiny houses very glossy, and they're nicely renovated, and they put it in this really good light. So they're trying to clearly
Exactly.
condition us.
Exactly. And let me point out that the people who live on garbage heaps in India and in Africa and who have a corrugated tin or plastic for their roofs, if they're lucky, live in tiny houses. Yes, they do. So private property rights, automobile ownership, and child protection are the three things that could mobilize people. Nothing deeper, nothing wider, nothing more philosophical, nothing more biological, unfortunately, in my estimation. But those things can indeed mobilize people. Now, you in Australia have an interesting situation. Your parliament cannot get you out of WHO or the United Nations. It's your governor general who works for the king and whose salary is provided by Parliament, as I understand it, who has to be leaned upon to write the letter that says, we're out, we're not playing anymore. That letter can be written, and it's as simple as that, just a letter. Now, what's it going to take? Parliament can sort of review stuff and can recommend to the secretary, to the Governor General, but Parliament can't really make the call. So what's it going to take? It's going to take public outrage consisting of the following three words: don't you dare. And if that outrage is sufficient and that outrage is consistent and that outrage touches the hearts and comes from the lips and typing fingers of enough people in Australia, a miracle will occur. Australia will suddenly be out of the death machine, as the United States will when we do the same, and Canada will when it does the same. And the globalists, the monsters, will come around again with a new plan, with a new name. I mean, the League of Nations didn't work. Okay, we'll call it the United Nations. How about that? Same deal. And they'll come back, and presumably this time we'll have figured out that they mean us no good and we don't need them. But at least we'll have the opportunity to have begun pulling the strands of corruption and destruction out of our society that they've been weaving in consciously for 140 years.
And I just want to go back to what you mentioned earlier with the distracting people with wars and conflicts. I think that's really fair, because you think the one thing that could bring people together, Muslims, Jews, maybe not the left, but people on the right, people in the center together, is child exploitation, pedophilia, indoctrination of children, motor vehicles. Those things can unite people. But the one thing that's dividing people is and distracting people is conflicts. Well, there's obviously sports and other things, but the main thing is conflicts. And Melbourne has been, well, first it was the Ukraine war, and people on the left and all these woke people were siding with Ukraine. And Putin's not a good guy, by the way. The Russians aren't angels exactly. But these people are getting involved in a conflict and becoming activists in something that they know nothing about. They don't understand the history and the context. Gaza is the same situation. I went to a pro-Palestine rally, my first one in Melbourne. Melbourne has been paralyzed by these pro-Hamas rallies. In the whole city, you can't even drive into the city every weekend, and there's thousands of people. So I went a few weeks ago and I was interviewing people, young people, and they were college-age students. They had absolutely no idea about they just were rattling off talking points. And I kid you not, some of these people, I've got it recorded on video, did not know where Israel was on a map.
It's on the Black Sea, no?
The Black Sea?
Yeah, right?
The state of Israel.
Yes, yes.
Like next to Lebanon, and Jordan.
My geography is a bit wonky right now. It's on the Mediterranean or the Black Sea? I can't remember now.
Yeah, look, I think it might be on the Black Sea. And from what geographic location is it referring to? From which river to which sea? From the river to the sea. From which river? Euphrates River.
Yeah, I believe that's the one. Yeah,
To the Black Sea.
Isn't it the Jordan Sea?
Now, there are people in our audience, wonderful people who are very critical of Israel, and you're more than welcome to be critical. I'm also critical of Israel, and they might even be pro-Palestinian. That's fine. If you're going to take a passionate stance on an issue, especially if you don't have you don't have any connection to that area, you don't have any family or any cultural connection, at least know the facts on the ground. And don't just go there with no idea. You don't even know where Israel is on a map, and you're rattling all these talking points on, and you're taking a very extreme position. So I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that. As a psychiatrist, you've got these college students that are going out and taking extreme positions. They have no idea what they're talking about, and they've been conditioned to talk and think like that on every issue.
They have absolutely been, I mean, it is horrifying. It is worldwide. Where suddenly did all this enthusiasm for the Palestinian position come from? Well, let me ask you, where suddenly did all this enthusiasm for Black Lives Matter and for the George Floyd position come from? Well, it came from George Soros, and it came from Bill Gates, and it came from the people who stand to profit both procedurally and financially from tearing society asunder. I personally was part of the social movement for integration in the United States, civil rights. I personally remember how it became unsayable and illegal to define people and opportunities on the basis of race. And now it is government policy again. How did that happen? How did that happen? How is it that we have programs now that are only open to people who have a certain amount of melanin in their skin? How is it that the mayor of Boston can hold a Christmas party for only elected people of color? And how is it that the courts in the United States can then say, well, that's okay, that's not a violation of the civil rights? Yeah, it is. It is. So we have levels of corruption that are absolutely intentional. And is that designed? Is making a white male an unemployable person designed to cohese society and bring us together as one happy band of brothers? No, it's designed to have another tribal rift so that we can hate each other along another parameter. We can hate each other because of our religions, because of our skins, because of our genders. And oh, by the way, as a doctor, as a human being, as a rational person, oops, there are two. That's all you get. One or the other. You get either boy becomes man or girl becomes woman. And let's be clear about this. Gender is not assigned at birth. It's not something that a doctor throws some dice on the ground and says, oh, look, there are 2 3s. That means it's a boy. Gender is identified because of biological reality. And I can tell you that I identify as a bald eagle. And that's nice. And I can put, feathers on my skin. I can paste them there. I could even have them surgically implanted if I were crazy enough. And I found a doctor who was crazy enough. But it doesn't make me a bald eagle. It makes me psychotic. It
You know,
makes me
we can
delusional.
joke about that, but I'm not sure how it is in the United States. Probably the United States is actually worse than Australia, but in Australia, we have children in school who are identifying as cats and dogs and other species, and the school is
Furries.
actually furries, and the school's accommodating them.
Okay, so if we have somebody who is delusional in a more familiar way, do we accommodate them, or do we identify that there's a serious problem here and we find out what the root of the problem is and we attempt to deal with whatever dysfunction there is? Now, people say, and I think this is important, if I may, to take an extra minute to talk about. I mean, it's your
Please
show,
do.
but I would like
Go
to.
for it. You've got the floor, doctor.
People talk about intersex people and hermaphrodites. Well, human beings are normally defined as having 2 arms and 2 legs. If a baby is born with a condition called phocomelia, instead of having 2 bones with a joint and the hands at the end, that second bone and joint, wrist joint, instead of that, can you hear me? The arm, the hand is attached up at the top of the arm. It's called a flipper arm. And if the mother was given thalidomide by a doctor, the chances of having that particular birth defect are increased. And a whole raft of babies were born in the thalidomide era with phocomelia. Now, phocomelia is unfortunate, and the babies need to be assisted and helped and treated and so on and so on. But the fact that a disorder can occur doesn't define normalcy. So it is not normal for human beings to have hands attached up near their shoulders. That is a birth defect, known technically as an inborn error of metabolism. That's what it's called. Okay, so having male and female genitalia, which is a very rare condition called hermaphroditism, is an inborn error of metabolism. It's a failure of the sculpting that takes place when a fetus's anatomy is created through natural developmental processes. It's an oops. It's a big, big oops. And having chimeric genetics, that is to say, having some extra genes in your genetic matrix, is also an inborn error of metabolism, intersex stuff. It's not a normal condition. It's a problem. And to say, well, you know, some people are born with male and female organs, so that must be normal. It's not normal. It's a big problem. And we need to deal compassionately and lovingly and skillfully with people who have problems, like we do with people who have birth events that lead to cerebral palsy, or people who are born with no ability to see. It happens. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't define normal. And let's stop kidding ourselves. There is no such thing as a transgender person. Nobody is born into the wrong body. Now, you may say, I was born into the wrong family. I wish I were born into, you know, my friend's family. That's another matter. That's a desire. But when we champion delusions and make the delusion social policy and then destroy children hormonally and surgically in order to further that delusion and destroy their ability to procreate. Oh, there's that. When we destroy their ability to procreate and their willingness to ever trust or love, by this delusional confusion, which is a social poison, then we are committing a crime. And I think it has to stop with each and every one of us. Nope, children are not pussycats. Every child loves to play. They're a pussycat at some point in their development. And they say, meow, meow, and oh, nice pussy, nice pussy. And you kiss the child, and then you say, okay, it's time to come to dinner. No, you sit at the table. That's how that goes. Enough.
They also pretend to be police officers and firemen, so we don't obviously try to reaffirm that. But what you raised was really important, because often people that push this transgender nonsense would say, oh, well, people are born intersex, so therefore it must be normal. Well, people, like you said, are also born with other birth defects. Do we go around chopping people's arms off? Well, maybe we shouldn't joke about it. There is another insane agenda, which is called body modification. So
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
another
Oh, yes.
misogynist.
And there are people who identify as disabled, who want to be treated as disabled. I'm in a wheelchair. I'm not, but I'm saying, a person who identifies as disabled says, I'm in a wheelchair. I identify as a blind, legless person. You have to accommodate me as if I were a blind, legless person. No, maybe psychiatric accommodation, but not physical. Nope, doesn't work like that. People have alternative realities. For example, I believe that we have in our hands the means to exit the death machine. You could say that makes me psychotic. However, I have had the experience of raising enough of a stink to get the United States government to drop a mandated vaccine in 2009, when 3.5 million people in 11 days used their freedom mouse to say, don't you dare. On day 12, the head of Health and Human Services said, oh, okay, we won't do that. Okay. So my delusion is supported by a strong strand of reality, and I invite other people to become involved in that, because if they don't, the reality that the globalists are pushing on us is going to kill most of us and forever damage the rest of us. So that there will be, by the way, Klaus Schwab has said the following encouraging thing: by the year 2030, there will be no human reproduction that is not external to the human body. Oops, don't you dare. Don't you dare. Each of us knows in our heart what is fundamentally human and what is fundamentally right. And we have to act on the basis of that, because otherwise these monsters will destroy us. And there is no such thing as a furry. There's such thing as a bad teacher and a bonkers, batshit crazy school administrator.
Exactly. And I wanted to ask you, Dr. Laibow, you mentioned destroying the population, very bleak terms there, but in terms of, let's talk about excess deaths. This is a segue into that. Have they achieved their objective in terms of destroying the majority of the world's population? Excess deaths, we haven't seen anything like it since the Second World War. In the UK alone, more people have passed away in 2021 to 2022 than in the entire Second World War. UK civilians, if we're just talking about them.
I don't believe they've passed away, Levi. I believe they've been murdered.
Oh,
it's
yeah,
different.
Sorry, murdered.
It's a very, my husband was murdered, and sometimes he was assassinated for this work. And sometimes people say, oh, I'm so sorry your husband passed away. My husband didn't pass away. My husband was murdered. It makes a difference. I mean, he's equally dead.
You're right.
But it makes a difference.
Words have meaning.
Intentionally ending someone's life is quite different from, people die. Sometimes they get pneumonia. Old people die. Children sometimes, have accidents. These things happen, and they're tragic, and they're able to be healed from. No one should heal from an intentional assassination. And these excess deaths are the murders, the Holocaust murders of our fellow human beings, our mothers, our brothers, our fathers, our sisters, our cousins, our distant relations 43 times removed on the other side of the planet. They're our family, and they're being murdered, as happens in every genocide. Now, I would point out that this conservative number of 16 to 20 million vaccine, quote, deaths so far is a conservative number, and it makes Hitler look like a damn piker.
These deaths, I mean, I don't expect you to know this, but if we were to drill down, there's 20 million, this official report. These are of people that were probably, or the relatives knew that the vaccine had induced, or basically their murder. But
Yes.
probably doesn't count all the number of deaths that people didn't think to link back to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so when we look at the excess death figures, now there are a couple of problems with the New Zealand whistleblower. The first problem is that the numbers that he's talking about are lower than the excess deaths in other countries. So he's missing pieces of the data set. Not that he's not correct. He's correct with the data set that he has. But as he himself said, he only has a partial data set. Even what he brought forward is an underestimate. That's pretty severe. That's pretty important. We know that victims of this vicious, intentionally destructive technology, victims of that, whom we have identified so far, whom we can suspect so far have been killed by it, have been gaslighted by their doctors, have been denied the treatment that might have saved some of them, many of them were murdered in hospital in order to get rid of them, in order to get, certainly in the United States, I don't know if this is true in Australia, but in the United States, the amount of money that a hospital got for putting somebody on a ventilator, even for a moment, for putting somebody on remdesivir or midazolam, these are deadly substances, and for diagnosing them with COVID, the number of dollars that they got could exceed $300,000 per patient. So we're talking about murder for hire. I think the last time I heard about murder for hire, it was a sort of mafia deal, and it's considered a crime. Murder for hire. That's what we're talking about. And I'd like to make a point to everyone who is a health person in any capacity in the health field, whether it's a clerk on a hospital ward or whether it's a doctor or a nurse or a hospitalist or whatever. If you are actively engaged in providing these deadly interventions, these bioweapon interventions to patients in any way, in any supportive form, you are guilty of a crime against humanity for each and every single offense. And you must be brought, in my view, to justice, to retribution, and to punishment for what you have done, because you, at the beginning, safe and effective. Okay, the Therapeutic Goods Association, the Drugs Administration, the Fraud and Death Administration in the United States, and the Center for Disease Creation, they say safe and effective, and they've always said safe and effective, and so I believe them. But very soon, you saw that they were neither safe nor effective. You began to understand through your own clinical experience. And if you couldn't see it through your own clinical experience, then you don't belong in the healthcare profession. You belong cleaning the street or something, because it's very clear. Everybody who was looking saw what was happening, and anybody who continued to do what they'd been told to do, to slaughter their fellow human beings, at that point began committing crimes against humanity willfully for their own self-interest. I got kids to put through college. I can't lose my job. Right. Those are crimes against humanity.
There's a reason.
And there's a matter of personal responsibility here. It isn't the state that injects. It's the individual doctor, pharmacist, nurse. I'm sorry, I interrupted you. I was passionate.
No, you have the floor. You have the floor. I was just going to say, I guess there's a reason why, and it's not to obviously undermine. There are a lot of great doctors out there like yourself, but I guess there's a reason why the establishment puts medical professionals on a pedestal and pays them a lot of money. There must be a good reason, I guess that could be.
The good reason is so they will have more to lose.
Mm,
That's why.
exactly.
The entire medical, I survived medical training, and I still have licenses in 2 states in the United States. I don't know why, but I still have my licenses, possibly because I do not use pharmaceuticals, so I don't poison people. That could have something to do with it. And also because I take really, really good notes. So if anybody were to challenge anything that happens under my care, it's all documented. But be that as it may, doctors were elevated into a special class of demigods. And having survived medical education, I can tell you that it was typical cult indoctrination. There was protein deprivation, there was sleep deprivation, there was emotional abuse, there was a series of impossible tasks that had to be accomplished in under huge pressure. And as you rose, and there was huge emotional abuse, as you rose in the hierarchy, you got to abuse people beneath you, and you got rewarded more and abused less. So your cult indoctrination made you more and more and more special. And you were given, I mean, after all, you have special vocabulary, and you have and you get made much of, and you are celebrated as a god. Now, a lot of people can be mobilized by ego and greed.
Mm,
And the entire medical profession, as it was created cynically by these Rockefeller monsters, etc., was created to be basically vending machines at a time when vending machines didn't exist for their damnable products and procedures. But they had to be fed this godlike status so they wouldn't dare to think independently. And all of us who have been through conventional education, and those of us who have been through any kind of professional education, have been trained to accept truth revealed from above with a small amount of questioning that's allowed. It's called academic research or whatever. You're allowed to question a little bit, but not too much, and certainly not the sacred things. And you are to accept what is revealed from on high. Authority provides truth, and you accept that, and you parrot it, safe and effective, safe and effective, safe, but it's killing people, but it's safe and effective. And I will keep doing it because my well-being and my ego well-being and my social standing all depends on safe and effective, safe and effective, safe and effective. And when the parrot says that, the parrot gets a cracker.
it's a good analogy. I mean, the propaganda is incredibly powerful because you use the word cult, and we're conditioned to think the last label we would put on a medical professional, a doctor, as a scientist, is the word cult, because we're conditioned to think that doctors are these forward-thinking, rational people. And who are you to question them? And that's, whenever someone that wasn't a doctor and a lot of people that didn't have medical backgrounds would question the whole narrative in the 2020, 2021 period, the first thing that they would ask him is, are you a doctor? Do you have a
Are you a
medical background?
doctor?
And very sarcastic,
Well,
of course.
yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. So there.
Billy Boy Gates isn't a doctor either, by the way, and he happens to be pushing the whole thing. He just froze for a minute.
I lost you. I lost you.
Sorry.
I said I am. Yes, I am a doctor, and you said so. I lost that.
Oh, I was just saying that, people are conditioned to think that doctors are these rational people. And the last label that they would subscribe to or ascribe to them would be the cult label. So, but let me ask you, with the excess deaths, so have they succeeded? First of all, my question's in two parts. One is, have they succeeded in carrying out their objective to depopulate? Number two, these excess deaths that we're seeing, this rise, is it going to get better or is it going to get worse before it gets better? Will we see will we see this curve rise even further?
Understand, I am not somebody who has been read into any sector of their program, so I'm observing and guessing. based on the data that I have. So everything I say is what I believe to be true, and I try always to make the distinction between what I know to be true and what I believe to be true. Okay, so they have certainly impacted the human fertility rate. That's for sure. It has dropped precipitously in direct linear relationship to the amount of success that their jab programs have had. The more jabbed, the less fertile human beings are at this point in terms of societies. They are certainly, now, I happen to believe quite passionately in reproductive rights for women. I do not believe women are ever at someone else's mercy to determine what happens to their ovaries and their uteri. If a woman does not choose to be pregnant, a woman has the right to do what she pleases with her body. Lots of people disagree with me about that. That is my personal belief as a woman and as a doctor who was around in the era of pregnant young girls who died of sepsis because of back alley abortions. I know that happens. I have seen it. I have held it in my hands as it was happening in emergency rooms. So I understand the importance of clean medical abortion procedures on demand. What has happened, however, is like every other thing that is decent and clean and good, the globalists have converted that into a monstrous evil, so that they are saying that abortion can take place at any time up to the completion of the exit of a live, viable baby from the mother's body. The mother can say, kill it. And
I think even at
the
9
healthcare
days, 9 or 20, I
in
think it's 21
California,
days.
it's up to
Yeah,
28 days.
that's
28
crazy.
days.
That's
That's called
cold-blooded murder.
infanticide.
Mm.
Also, batshit crazy murder. And so they're saying that in Africa, there can be
Can
no
I just
health
interrupt
care.
you for a moment? Is that actually law
Yeah.
in, was that passed in California, that legislation?
Yes,
And
yes,
they've actually
that
carried
is
this
law
out?
today. Yes,
Have there been cases, confirmed cases where they've
yes,
carried this out? Wow.
yes, yes. It's called infanticide in a sane world. You can't call that abortion. A viable infant who is killed for convenience or random whatever. No, no, that's murder. And we have to call it murder, right? It's not abortion, it's murder. And so if you read the WHO abortion guidelines, you will see that there's no such thing as a baby. There is pregnancy tissue, and there's no such thing as a mother. There is the birthing person. That's known as a mother. And by the way, just a little parenthetical sideline here. The American Medical Association, an organization that I withdrew from many decades ago, many decades, the American Medical Association is endorsing the right of transgender women, mythical beings that they are, to have uterus implants in the name of equity, so that transgender women, which is men, who have uteri implanted in their bodies have the right to experience birth. Well, you know, those uteruses came from a woman. Don't even, I mean, when you begin to think about the nightmare horror show that is leading to, it's almost impossible to wrap your mind around. Anyway, the American Medical Association, who has surgeons and endocrinologists and all kinds of specialty people who are going to make lots of money from that, yeah, they say, oh, that's good. That's even better than lopping breasts off healthy girls and penises off healthy boys. Yay! So we're talking about evil and greed and lack of rational thought. The fact that somebody's a doctor just means that they're good at being obedient. That's all it means. And let's be clear about that. We adulate them. It's like saying the fact that somebody's a priest means that they're pure. If they're raping children, they're still raping children. You know. So fertility. all of this transgender stuff, all of this this comprehensive sexuality education, SOGI 123 in Canada, it is all designed to rupture the bond of trust, because everybody is continually overstimulating and confusing children and ravaging them, as a matter of fact. And therefore, children trust no one. And according to the Rutgers Institute, funded by Bill and Melinda Gates and the International Planned Parenthood Foundation, and tasked by the United Nations, UNESCO, and WHO to develop the educational materials for the comprehensive sexuality education, according to them, when children are raised in this way, they are less likely to bond with other people and therefore reproduce. So the harm of that damage program has not yet begun to be clear. This is asking parents or teaching parents that they need to become their children's predators, starting to masturbate them at birth, because children need to learn about masturbation. Okay, here's a child psychiatrist tidbit. You ready? No child on the planet has ever needed to be taught how to masturbate.
I think they're quite happy
Not
playing
one.
with dolls and pretending to be firemen and policemen.
Yeah, they do that just fine. But they also discovered that their bodies provide them with feelings, and they find out more about the feelings that they like. They find out less about the feelings that they don't like. And what children need to be taught is what the social norms around masturbation are. Well, darling, that's a lovely thing to do, and everybody does it, but we do that in private. So finish your dinner, and then you can go into your room and it's called masturbation, and it's perfectly normal, but not with other people around. I mean, if that's the social norm of this particular society, it's what they need to be taught. But they'll figure out how to give good feelings through their bodies just fine, thank you. They don't need their parents becoming pedophiles.
So
They don't need to learn.
Oh, sorry, go on, doctor.
There is a goal, an articulated WHO, UN technical education guideline goal, and this is published on preventgenocide2030.org, that children by the age of 4 must have developed lust, that it is a right for children to engage in sex as early as possible, that it is a right for children to have a sexual partner as early as possible.
Just
that
to
children
clarify,
normatively
with an adult. So a sexual partner, i.e. an adult, and no age of consent. The age of consent.
On March 23rd of last year, 2023, the United Nations issued its judicial recommendations for every lawmaker, lawyer, prosecutor, and pedophile in the world. And one of the things that they said, and this too is published on preventgenocide2030.org, where people in Australia and a great many other countries can go to take action to force their governments to get them out of the death machine. But we also have there this document that says that as long as people are consenting, there is no age at which consent can be given. People can give consent at any age, which means if somebody says to a 2-year-old, and I'm not exaggerating, somebody says to a 2-year-old, touch me here and I'll give you a piece of candy. And the 2-year-old says, okay, that's called consent. If we're talking, oh, of course it's coercion. Of course it's coercion. It's like informed consent that says, hey, listen, I want to inform you that if you don't take this experimental deadly brew in your body and let me put it into your child's body too, not only are you going to lose your job, but I'll take your child away from you.
So much for
That's
consent.
not so much for consent, right? Because you don't have those rights. Under these programs, you have no rights. So what will happen to the fertility, the voluntary fertility of those who are still left fertile, who grow up to the age where they might reproduce? We don't know. What will happen to the children of women who have received these gene-altering products? What will happen to the children of men who have received these gene-altering products? What is happening to the sperm level of these gene-altered persons? I can tell you everything that is known about people who have been injected says that the sperm level has plummeted. And we know that the bad stuff is designed to gravitate to the testes and to the ovaries in the same way that it also gravitates to the heart. We also know that children don't have heart attacks unless their hearts have been poisoned. And in the 54 years that I've been a physician, and the 4 years before that in medical school, I've never seen a child have a heart attack. Now, I'm not a cardiologist and I'm not a pediatric cardiologist, but it's that rare. Except it's happening now.
We associate, well, for many decades prior to 2020, we associated heart attacks with people that were over 50. People in their 70s, normally 60s, 70s, 80s, would have a heart attack, not a 4 or 5-year-old child. And it's quite interesting what you mentioned is you're coming from, you're a psychiatrist, a child psychiatrist. So you're saying that kids who are exposed, hyper-sexualized and exposed to this filth, this pornographic filth and this pedophilia become very cold. And they're unable to love.
They no longer trust. They don't attach in the same way.
That's interesting.
Their emotional development, their relational development is truncated. Now, if the trauma is repeated, the repair of that becomes more and more and more unlikely. And that's intentional. That's intentionally created. By the age of 9, according to the guidelines, the technical guidelines of this program, children should know how to use online pornography fluently. What? Why? Why should children between 6 and 9 be learning how to use pornography? Why? Why would you want to expose children to images and concepts that they have absolutely no emotional capacity to deal with and will be overwhelmed by? But by the age of 6, children should be able to fill out, I kid you not, a checklist. And the checklist says, do I want to have sex with this person? Excuse me? What? Your 6-year-old is deciding whether or not to have sex. Do I want to hold hands with this person? If I do, I probably want to have sex with them. Do I want to have oral sex with this person, anal sex, or genital sex with this person? Well, how would a 6-year-old know about oral, anal, genital sex? That's because in kindergarten, when they were 5, and in first grade, when they're 6, the teacher is guiding them through in-person exercises where they learn how to perform oral sex on one another. They learn how to perform anal sex. They learn how to perform genital sex, and they learn how to perform digital sex. Oh, by the way, I forgot that part. And this is part of the curriculum. Oh, but wait, it's better. Everything, math, social studies, history, gym, everything is taught, and I quote, through the lens of sexuality, which means there is never a moment when the conditioning stops. There is never a time when a kid can just think about math or science. How, look, we put a potato in the ground and we watered it and it sprouted. And what does that mean? And oh, look, the leaves turn toward the sun. That's called phototropism. Nope. It's all sex, 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 endlessly. What happens to children to whom that happens? They are crippled developmentally forever. They are controllable. They have a level of immaturity, psychosexual and personal, emotional immaturity, relationship immaturity, that allows them to be controlled forever. And then they can live in 16 square meter cubicles and eat the bugs and be distracted by whatever and perform whatever menial tasks they're supposed to perform and think that's all of life without any spirituality. As Yuval Harari says, there are no rights. It's a story we tell ourselves. Human beings have no rights. As Yuval Harari says, humans have no soul. Humans do not need a soul. This is what they have in mind. This is the destruction of humanity.
And the way they've done it, it's brilliantly clever and it's evil. Especially with the
Absolutely.
LGBTQ thing and the pedophilia they're pushing on children. I mean, they started with the LGBTQ rights and they progressed to pedophilia, which is a natural progression, but they did it under the guise of civil rights. So they reframed it. I think in the 80s they had NAMBLA, which was openly pedophilic. And I think then they somehow realized that wasn't working. So they changed their approach and they adopted this civil rights. They rebranded and they presented themselves as the new Martin Luther King movement. And if you oppose them, because we're all about free love and marriage equality, and if you oppose us, then you're automatically a racist, a bigot, this phobe, that phobe. So brilliantly, the way they marketed and did this whole thing.
Brilliantly.
Brilliant.
And we have to understand that there are two separate intentions here. We, ordinary people, whether we're on the right or the left or Jewish or Muslim or black or white or whatever, we ordinary people all want the same thing. We want to thrive and survive. We want to see our children have enough to eat and be educated and be happy and thrive in their lives. That's what we want. That's what people want. All people. They want us dead in the vast numbers of our populations, dead. And they want those who remain to be minimized from the DNA out. They want us to be woven into the internet of bodies. They want every activity of our bodies to be generating their currency and serving their needs. They want nothing independent or filled with integrity or even coming anywhere close to love to be part of our lives. They want us to be the endlessly subservient and unquestioning slaves that they have been building the science to create. People are very, very excited about Elon Musk as a champion of free speech. Isn't that great? Elon Musk is currently conducting the Neuralink experiments of the chip in the brain to control you via the satellites. Elon Musk on December 11th with the United States government conducted a high-level radiation test. I don't know if you're aware of this.
No, I'm not.
A high-level radiation test in the United States in 13 cities, and the longitudes and latitudes were released on December 13th, 2 days after the test. High-level radiation inputs from the satellites to see how effectively they could irradiate with non-ionizing radiation at tissue destructive levels the population.
Wow.
Oh, that was done with the active participation of the United States government. Oops, that's a bit of a problem. And that's to build the Neuralink control system. Oops. I guess his speech gets to be free, and maybe that of his 10 children. But how about you? How about me? No, apparently not.
So they presented this guy as a knight in shining armor, basically. This Elon Musk character.
Good.
And Dr. Laibow, is there anything else? Like I said before, you've got the floor. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience tonight?
Yes. This is all fixable. And you are the source of the fix. You are the source of the power. They want us to believe that we are powerless, It is a lie. They want us to believe that we are irrelevant. It is a lie. They want us to believe that we depend on them for our truth. It is a lie. They want us to believe that they have our best interests at heart. It is a lie. And they also want us to believe that we can trust the governments and whatever country we're talking about, from the biggest country in the world to the smallest country in the world. And by the way, Putin is a graduate of the WEF Young Leaders Program. As soon as he finished that, he came back to Russia, and shazam, within 6 months, he was the president of Russia. How'd that happen? Before that, he was just a common KGB thug. How'd that happen? Promising lad was taken up and polished off and made the president, and there he is. He's not our savior. But to go back to what we can do, there's a website attached to my name,
and I'll put
Prevent
it in,
Genocide 2030.
in the description and on the screen as well. I'll display it on the screen so people will see it.
And there are several things there. First is, for people in the US, there is an opportunity for you to become part of the cavalcade of demand of millions of people who say, pass this bill in the House, pass this bill in the Senate with a supermajority, a 2/3 majority, so it can override the inevitable veto of the sock puppet in charge, whether it's Biden or Harris, doesn't matter. The sock puppet in charge is going to veto it, so it has to be overridden by the members of the Congress. And then we will be out of the United Nations, WHO, UNESCO, UNICEF, the refugee program, the World Bank, the whole shebang. In Australia, you need to press that there is an exitthewho.com website. You need to put every bit of effort that you can into forcing the inevitable departure of your country from this monstrous system, which is designed to kill you. The same thing in Canada. There is a petition, a parliamentary petition, which you can sign by going to preventgenocide2030.org/Canada. And then after you sign the petition, you can tell your members of parliament through a letter that we've set up for you to send, get me out of this. They have the same problem. They have to do it through the Governor General. All it takes is popular will being expressed in a roar, not a whimper, not a request, a roar, so that they, the sock puppets set up by the bad guys, understand that if they don't do what we ask, say, demand, require, they're going to lose control of the control, which is what they want. So we have to really push them. And I can say my part, and you can say your part. But damn it, if you are not taking, you out there, you, not Levi, if you are not taking this as your responsibility as a human being, then you're agreeing with them that they can kill us and they can enslave those few whom they permit to survive. And that makes you their ally, and you don't want to be that. It's binary, it's black and white. You're either this or that. Whether you're Jewish, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, whether you're Muslim, whether you're male, whether you're female, doesn't make any difference. If you're a human being, then you have a responsibility to aid humanity against the monster. My New Year's resolution should be your New Year's resolution, whether you want to gain weight or lose it. And that is, I want the monster out of the kingdom, and I want to repair the damage that the monster has done. That's it.
And if everyone, if you, our wonderful audience at Cafe Lockdown, if you've got a bit of homework, if you can all head on out after watching this podcast to preventgenocide.org, sign the petition. It's a great website.
Preventgenocide2030.org.
Sorry, I'm being corrected. Preventgenocide2030.org. Easy to find, lots of amazing resources. There's a whole page there devoted to Australia and what you can do, how you can contact your local MPs. So it's all about people power. And the power of the mouse, that's right. And Dr. Laibow, how else, aside from the preventgenocide2030.org, how else can people find you on social media or on the internet?
You can use the comment section in preventgenocide2030.org. My email is dr.rima, R-I-M-A, at naturalsolutionsfoundation.com. Dr.Rima at naturalsolutionsfoundation.com. And I will answer your email. I get thousands of emails a day, so it'll take me a while, but I'll get there.
Wow.
The most important thing is for you to become a messenger of the good. It's really simple. Talk to other people, and they won't want to hear what you have to say. Say it again. Takes about 6 repetitions. Marketers know this. Takes about 6 repetitions before people say, oh, I know that. It was my idea. Okay. So you have to be a messenger of truth, or you're agreeing to the slaughter.
Powerful words. Dr. Laibow, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you back on. We would love to have you back once again soon. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you.